In this episode of the Encounter Report, 3 adventurers stand up to the Society's debt exploitation and evolution worlds. There's Axelrod, your humble narrator who did a not blind playthrough on an emulator. Alongside him is Landale, who played the game for the first time on GameCube, and Albells, who did a not blind playthrough on the GameCube. Get your ninjutsu runs ready because Mag is about to believe it.
I can't believe it!
Battle types grace our presence first, and I think one thing that is very notable here is the stream percent. Evolution Worlds contains one of the highest ratios of encounters to everything else, and random encounters alone take up, at minimum, 33% of the entire on-screen time playing the game, which is significant. I also want to mention that optional encounters were encounters hiding in pillars that could be destroyed by Mag. Additionally, encounters spawned from traps were labeled as random encounters and not separated into a separate category. We're making a brief pit stop at battle locations just to point out that effectively all encounters were dungeon encounters. And next up are combat types, where Albells joins the illustrious No Deaths Club. That said, it isn't to say that there weren't some close calls, as the final boss certainly gave him a run for his money. For Landale and myself, we both got put in our places with a Yurka fight, while I also got deaded by the final boss. It's also worth noting the few encounters everyone ran away from in the grand scheme of things, as they can be pretty tough. Following that up are subtypes, and for the most part, there isn't much diversity in terms of what encounters are doing. Thankfully, surprise attacks, which are labeled as ambushes here, as well as back attacks are a thing. Impressively, ambush encounters, which allow you to enter the encounter with an advantage, take up 23% or more of the encounter percentage. It's not an easy number to achieve considering how narrow a lot of the running space is for dungeons. You might also notice that the grinding numbers are here, but without numbers. I put that in there because, despite nobody grinding on paper, I actually did. I went into the Yurka fight dangerously underleveled, which could be a big contributor for why I died. I subsequently did approximately 2 hours of off-screen grinding, and based on the game's final encounter numbers, equates to about 150 encounters or so. Notable locations are next, and here's 7 of the larger dungeons. For clarification, the dungeons not shown here are the Sun Temple, which has the first encounter of the game, Kron Prinz, which is where the Eugene boss fights are, the train car where Carcano is first introduced, and lastly Bandage Trap and Pine Village, which are where the Carcano dungeon and boss fight are. Additionally, for experience gained, this is only the experience that Mag acquired and does not count what the other characters received, as that can change based on who lands the killing blow on enemies. So, here we can see some scaling doing some weird things with Blaze Ruins. Its times are significantly lower than Heaven Relics, and this is largely due to the game doing a soft reset in this dungeon. Once Eugene is defeated in Kron Prinz, which would slot between Heaven Relics and Blaze Ruins, the second portion of the game begins. Blaze Ruins sets lower level enemies in the random encounters, and when reaching the boss of the dungeon, it actually appears to scale according to the player's level. But even from Heaven Relics onwards, you can see how many encounters I was avoiding, which was my inevitable downfall for the Yurka fight. Meanwhile, Landale was fairly thorough in dungeons, to the point where he would fight effectively every encounter in front of him. He also went out of his way to do the optional dungeon called the Tower of Despair, which he completed in its entirety. Albells also had a similar approach as Landale, where he fought nearly every encounter in front of him. There were even moments where he would go back to previous floors to make sure he didn't miss any rooms or treasures. Following that up is party composition, and one caveat here is that the final level for the characters are their last scene levels. Characters do receive some sort of backup experience as the game progresses, but those values are hidden unless the characters are added into the party. But with that out of the way, we can definitely see which characters were favored by everyone. Joining Mag for my final party were Pepper and Carcano. Landale utilized Pepper and Gray, and Albells used Pepper and Carcano as well, although he was extremely disappointed in Carcano's performance and wished he was using Chain. We've also got a look at level progression for each person as a stat graph. On the left, we have the levels, and on the bottom, many of the bosses in the game. Each boss takes up a rectangle in the graph, and within those rectangles, we have Mag's levels for each participant. Lastly, the red shows the level of the boss. Here we can see that each of us did a pretty good job staying within the level appropriate ranges for bosses until the Prince Eugene fight had concluded. From there, our first boss of the second portion of the game appears to scale 5 levels lower than the player. In this instance, I chose the highest level of 18 from Landale's playthrough, while the boss was level 17 for Albel's and 15 for myself. Excluding Carcano, who was lower level than the boss before him for some reason, bosses started to leave us behind after the blocker boss fight. And when Yurka came around, we were all under-leveled as he was 59, while everyone was hovering around the low 50s. And to close us out, here are the final combined stats. For total encounters, I included the final number given at the end of the game in brackets. This number doesn't count deaths or shenanigans, so in the case of Landale, he had 1 death, 1 battle where he reset the game in the middle of it, and another battle where he completed it and then reloaded to do the boss again with different party members. For Albel's, he managed to overcome the 50% threshold for encounter percent, making his playthrough consisting of a majority share in encounters. He also had the shortest average encounter time of everyone as well as the least amount of character deaths. And that's the Evolution Worlds Encounter Report. I hope you visit everyone's channels and social media to praise them for all this wonderful data. With another report done, I think I'll let Carcano help sign us out.
Catch you later!
Thanks for watching, appreciate it, see you on the next video.